know that you and me see the same colors the same way when you and me see. Is my red blue for you or my green your green too? Could it be true we see differing hues and say we do? Then how would we discover this fact? And even if we did, would there be any impact? I don't think this would affect us personally, but I think it would have ripple effects throughout the interior design industry.
That was Link Neal from Good Mythical Morning, pondering a question that I think we've all tried to grapple with at one point or another. More than that, I think we've all felt that hopeless, sinking feeling and trying to work out how we could even begin to answer the question. How do you describe a color to someone without using that color's name? You can't call it warm. Assuming the person you're talking to sees blue where you see red, the adjective warm just refers to their experience of your blue. There's the same problem with calling it cool, just, in reverse. You can't tell them that it's the color of the sky, because for them, that's just your experience of red. It seems like an impossible problem to solve, and often it's tempting to just discard it, except in our most indulgent flights of fancy. But there is a long line of people throughout the history of philosophy and psychology who have resisted that very temptation. One of the most widely known philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche, for example, approaches the problem in his work on truth and lies in a non-moral sense. He has this to say. The following must be said. If each of us had a different kind of sense perception, if we could only perceive things now as a bird, now as a worm, now as a plant, or if one of us saw a stimulus as red, another as blue, while a third even heard the same stimulus as a sound, then no one would speak of such a regularity of nature. Rather, nature would be grasped only as a creation which is subjective in the highest degree. After all, what is a law of nature as such for us? We are not acquainted with it in itself, but only with its effects, which means in its relation to other laws of nature, which in turn are known to us only as sums of relations. Therefore, all these relations always refer again to others and are thoroughly incomprehensible to us in their essence. All that we actually know about these laws of nature is what we, ourselves, bring to them. Alright, so even if Nietzsche up to this point has resisted the tradition of discarding questions like whether or not people see the same color, he certainly hasn't resisted the tradition of being disgustingly opaque in his philosophical writing. So what the hell is Nietzsche talking about here? Why is it important? And what does it have to do with the fact that we might see different colors? Well, where Link in the song at the top of the episode thought about the implications of seeing different hues for our own interpersonal relationships and the interior design industry, Nietzsche thought about the implications of this problem for our understanding of the laws of nature. Laws of nature, by their nature, are supposed to be unfalteringly true. Gravity on Earth goes down at a constant speed. Objects in motion stay at motion unless acted upon by an outside force. Dogs are inherently better than cats. Given that light and our optical nerves are a part of that very same nature, that infallible nature, if we saw different colors than one another when looking at an apple, say, the rigidity of the whole system would be called into question. Here's where the problem for Nietzsche really takes off. We don't know any of those laws of nature in virtue of themselves. We only know them because of their relationships to other things. And we only know about those other things because of their relationships to yet more things. And governing this whole system is our own relationship with those things. And that's the rub. Everything in the laws of nature bottoms out in our own subjective relationship to those laws. So if our subjectivity is so radically different from one another, such that where you saw red, I saw blue, then the rest of the system is compromised on the basis of its relationship to those inherently different experiences. Nothing is objective anymore. Everything is subjective. You're listening to Slice of Phi, a podcast where philosophy meets life. This whole project was born out of a recent call to action from philosophers like T. Nguyen, a philosophy professor at Utah Valley University, and Barry Lam, host of the podcast Hi-Fi Nation. You see, philosophy has earned a not entirely unfair reputation of being purely theoretical and separated from the practical realm of everyday life. Even Socrates was the target of satirical commentary about the practice of philosophy. In his play The Clouds, Aristophanes has the character Socrates swinging around high above the ground in a basket held aloft by some strange makeshift contraption. Strepsiades, a visitor to Socrates' school, asks him, "You're looking down upon the gods up there, in that basket? Why not do it from the ground, if that is what you're doing?" Socrates balks. "Impossible! I'd never come up with a single thing about celestial phenomenon if I did not suspend my mind up high to mix my subtle thoughts with what's like them. The air. If I turned my mind to lofty things, but stayed there on the ground, I'd never make the least little discovery. Huh." Today, philosophers have just traded baskets and rafters with ivory towers. So, what is Slice of Phi trying to accomplish? Well, we're hoping to drag philosophers down from their baskets and their towers and have them engage with the world. Take their heads from out of the clouds, and talk to people who aren't philosophers. As we saw at the top of the episode, philosophical questions like whether or not we see the same colors have a remarkable amount of practical implications in our interpersonal relationships, in design work, and even in the sciences. The thing is, pretty much every philosophical question can have that same practical relevance if you just look for it. First, we need to understand what philosophy is exactly. We need a full episode for this because philosophy is unique in at least one way. It is one of the only, if not the only, field where experts in that field don't always agree about what it is they're supposed to be doing, or even how to define what it is they're experts in the first place. So we're going to go way back to philosophy's name day. Picture this. It's sometime around 380 BCE, and you're in Athens, Greece. You just got done wrestling some dude in the gymnasium, and your friends are off throwing dice in the corner. As you're hanging out, some old guy, who you've heard a lot about, starts attracting the attention of the crowd, talking about something interesting. Dang, you think to yourself, this guy should start a podcast. This is the context of Plato's dialogue, the Lysis. This isn't the first time the word philosopher or philosophy was coined. It's often accepted that Pythagoras coined the term in order to separate himself from sophists, who we'll learn about later. But even still, the Lysis is one of the first places where there's an in-depth discussion about what it means to be a philosopher. See, the word philosophy is just a combination of two Greek words. On the one hand, you have philein, verb, infinitive, to love, often in terms of close friendship and family. Or alternatively, philos, which is an adjective that's just describing one of the people doing the whole feline thing. And on the other hand, you have Sophia, noun, wisdom. So, philosophy is just the love of wisdom, and following from that, philosophers are lovers of wisdom. If only it were that simple. There have been books and books and books and articles and articles and articles dedicated to trying to figure out what love is. There was even that one song by Hathaway. Oh, and don't worry, there have been just as many books written about what wisdom is and books. So, where do we start? Let's start with love. The complication for a term like love, especially as it relates to a definition of philosophy, is that in the ancient Greek, there were multiple different words for different kinds of love. You had philia, which you already know about. There was eros, which is a word associated with more erotic desires. There was agape, which is a selfless sort of love, and there was storge, which was love mostly between parents and children. But hold up. Philia already has familial love tied up into it. So why do we need storge? Well, it turns out all of these kinds of love move in on each other's territory sometimes. Some people have even suggested eros is just everything that philia is, plus sexual desire. And to complicate the issue of eros and philia even more, Plato has dialogues on both of them. The Lysis, as we've learned, talks about philia, and this is where the term philosopher is used as an explicit connection between love and wisdom. It goes through a ton of complicated arguments, asking questions like, whenever someone loves someone else, which of the two becomes a friend of the other? Is it the lover of the one being loved, or the one being loved of the lover? Or is there no difference? This passage is one of my favorites in Greek. I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't read it to you here, but I promise it isn't a purely self-indulgent exercise. Just mostly self-indulgent. As I read it, though, pay attention to how often philia pops up across the different words. These words, while using the same stem that comes from philia, indicate both an active and passive participant in the feeling of love. Here we go. Apedon testina philae, poteros poteru philos gignitai, ha philon tu philumenu, ha philumenos tu philuntas, udon diafere. Read with a focus on the distinction between active and passive participants, part of the answer to the question, what is philosophy, reveals itself. In philia, there's a difference between being an active participant, being the person who loves someone else, and being the one who is loved by that original party. Normally, when we want to talk about friendship, though, both friends are playing both roles. It would hardly be a friendship if you loved someone and they were indifferent or even actively hostile towards you. So using philia to describe a relationship with philosophy, which, because of what it is, can't return your affection, seems strange. Luckily, there's eros. Eros is something that Plato has analyzed and argued for in his dialogues The Phaedrus and the Symposium. Now, I'm more familiar with the Symposium, so that's what I'll be focusing on here. Eros is often translated into something like erotic desire. It's used to explain the kind of desire that's carnal in nature. A kind of desire that we're overcome with and that washes over us. And yet, in his dialogues on Eros, the erotic desire is very much connected to what philosophy is. How is this the case? Well, according to one of the characters, Diotima, every single one of us, in virtue of being alive, has this erotic desire, this insatiable need for just one thing: immortality. Yeah, you heard that right. Just because we're alive, according to the Symposium, we're all just iterations of some really bad fantasy villain trope. Yeah, but hold on, you might say. I get that because we're alive, we might all have erotic desire, but what I don't get is how we move from that erotic desire to a desire for immortality? And even if that did make sense, and it doesn't, how does it tie into philosophy? Like, at all? I'm glad you asked. Let's work through the arguments. You see, it all starts with Socrates telling Agathon that he's an absolute idiot. Sitting in their circle at the Symposium, each of the characters in the dialogue attempted to give a speech in praise of the god Eros, our god desire, describing what qualities he has and why they're praiseworthy. Agathon claimed that Eros is a desire for beauty. That much seems fine, but he also claimed that Eros was beautiful. Whoops. What do you mean, whoops, Socrates? Love is one of the most beautiful things in the world. We call it beautiful all the time. What? You never cried at a wedding before? Think of all the things that you desire. A vacation, maybe? That promotion? Anything on your Amazon wish list? Hell, even wisdom. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself on that one. Of all the things that you desire, how many of them do you actually possess? Most people would say none of them. That's why they desire them in the first place. Desire, it seems, is for things that we don't have. And so if eros, or love, is a desire for beauty or things that we find beautiful, then eros, or desire, or love, can't be beautiful itself. But where did all of this beauty stuff come in? That pack of air filters for my air conditioning unit sitting in my Amazon shopping cart isn't exactly, the height of beauty. Yeah, okay, fair. Look, I'm not going to go through the whole argument here because, honestly, it's a doozy and it's all over Plato, not just in the Symposium. But for our purposes, it's enough to know that Socrates and Diotima conclude that, and I'm quoting here, "It is what is really beautiful and graceful that deserves to be loved." End quote. Perhaps unsurprisingly, as philosophers have been pulling this trick for literally millennia, Diotima claims that wisdom is, quote, extremely beautiful, end quote. Now, I poke fun, but it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Anytime we gain any sort of understanding of things that seemed completely beyond our grasp, isn't there a moment of real elation? True appreciation for what you understand now that you didn't before? If not, maybe you're not a philosopher. But I think most people have had an experience like this, and to bring it all back to the point of this whole endeavor, most people have been engaging in philosophy at various points in their life. Now, finally, to tie it all back into immortality. Socrates acknowledges that there might be some things that we actually do possess, and yet still love, still desire. Doesn't that throw a wrench into the whole claim earlier, though? Not necessarily. A strong person can desire to be strong. A healthy person can desire to be healthy. Why? Well, because those qualities aren't guaranteed forever. So we have to add a qualification to those desires. We want those things to be ours, and once they are ours, we want them to be ours forever. That desire for eternity is how love stays with us, because we can't have that. And because we can't have that eternity, we desire it and all of the things that would make that eternity possible. And what would allow for an eternity of existence to keep all of the things that we love forever? Well, immortality. We chase this immortality by literally having children. By having biological children, we pass down a part of us to live on in them, which will then get passed further down. This way, part of us stays in the world long after we're gone. But, according to Diotima, we can have another type of child. A child of the mind. An idea. We pass that idea on through conversations, through policies, through writings, through projects, through podcasts. And if someone else takes hold of that idea, works on it, thinks through it, shapes it, and then passes it on to someone else, well, we've successfully lived past our current mortal boundaries. Just think about it. You've listened to almost half an hour of philosophy about Plato, a man who died 2,367 years ago. There's definitely a sense in which he's still here with us today. Philosophy. The love of wisdom. If we take Plato's story seriously, then it's a desire, a love, for the most beautiful kinds of knowledge, for wisdom. Knowledge of the cosmos, of theology, of the sciences and how the world all fits together. But we don't start chasing this kind of beauty right away. We have to learn about it by witnessing other beautiful things. And we try to do that by ascending what is often referred to as Diotima's ladder of love. Starting on this ladder, we fall in love with and desire a single beautiful body. A body that we're attracted to and drawn to. Something that's easy to witness and take in. It makes sense why we would have to start here. We can see and describe a beautiful body, but we can't see and describe the foundations of the universe. Eventually, we realize that the beauty we see in that singular body is present in all other bodies. In other words, we start to recognize that beauty is more universal than we originally thought. From here, we fall in love with beautiful minds and their beautiful ideas. Recognizing the pattern of beauty in these ideas, like we recognize the pattern of beauty in bodies, we start to recognize and think about and love ideas that are more and more beautiful themselves. More spicy bits of wisdom. Importantly, each rung on this ascension is necessary to reach the next. Philosophers, though, have forgotten about the beauty of the world in favor of the beauty of ideas. So, as I said from the beginning, what Slice of Phi is trying to do, what our goal is to get philosophers to love the world they've left behind again. To bring their ideas that they treasure so back to the world of body and action, and to see how their ideas interact with that world. to actually enter the cave. There's still one more thing to address, though. It's called philosophy, not erosophy. So what gives? I don't have a fully fleshed out theory, but here it goes. Remember when I said that Pythagoras first used the term philosophy to separate himself from the sophists? He wanted to do that because sophists, literally translated as wise people, were people who would argue for anything, whether they believed in it or not. Their supposed wisdom was in being able to win arguments because they understood the art of rhetoric and how to force people to accept contradictions in their own views. It wasn't in an actual care or a desire for the truth. So, maybe the choice to use philia instead of eros in naming philosophy goes something like this. In desiring wisdom, a philosopher wants to preserve it as best as they can. They don't want to get it wrong or bastardize it. They want to learn about it and protect it. What kind of a relationship would describe this deep sense of responsibility and care for something? A friendship. Philia. So in loving wisdom in the sense that they desire it, eros, philosophers also love it in the sense that they are friends of wisdom, philia, as opposed to sophists who would just as soon twist and abuse it to their own ends. And so we have philosophers doing philosophy. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't be afraid to leave a like and a comment. And if you want to stay up to date with our videos and discussions, you can subscribe to this channel by clicking the button in the bottom left corner of your screen. We have quite a few different videos planned for the near future that span topics from morality to personhood, and even the philosophy of biology and science. But I would still love to hear from you. What kind of videos do you want to see in the future? What topics do you want us to cover? What pieces of pop culture do you want us to dive into and analyze the philosophy within? It can literally be anything. Your favorite book or movie, your favorite song or show. Let us know in a comment and we'll start researching to see what kind of video we can put together. Thanks again, and we'll see you when we dig into our next Slice of Phi.